Welcome to the Book Voices channel. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our latest book discussions. Now let's dive into today's book.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Mhm.
We often look at these incredibly successful people and just assume, they were born with it, some special gift.
Mhm.
But then you dig a little and you find these, surprising stories,
Mm.
like Charles Darwin or Leo Tolstoy, apparently just seen as pretty average kids.
Yeah, and what about Ben Hogan? Golfing legend, right? Supposedly really uncoordinated as a child.
Exactly. It's not just academics or sports either. Cindy Sherman, the artist, failed her first photography course. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And Geraldine Page, Oscar winner, was told early on, maybe acting wasn't for her. She'd give it up.
It kind of flies in the face of that whole natural talent idea, doesn't it?
It really does. So, okay, let's unpack this. What's actually going on here? What's the common thread?
Well, what's fascinating and what we're diving into today is this idea that maybe those qualities we think are fixed aren't so fixed after all. Our main source for this deep dive is Carol Dweck's work, specifically Mindset, the new psychology of success. And she introduces this really powerful concept, this distinction between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Right. And look, if you're listening and you want to get a quick but solid handle on what makes people tick, maybe even shift your own view a bit, this is definitely for you.
Yeah.
Dweck stuff looks at how our basic beliefs about intelligence, personality, talents, how they really shape everything in our lives.
It's fundamental.
So our mission today, get to grips with these two mindsets,
Yeah.
fixed versus growth. We want to see how they play out, in learning, relationships, success.
All those big areas.
Yeah, and really understand why getting this concept can be, a game changer for you personally, professionally. Think of it as your shortcut to being really informed on something pretty profound.
Okay, so let's break it down. What is this fixed mindset?
Yeah, what does it look like?
So someone with a fixed mindset, they basically believe their qualities are just carved in stone. You've got a certain amount of intelligence, a particular personality, X amount of talent, and that's kind of it.
Right, like you're dealt a hand and that's the hand you play.
Exactly. So success becomes all about proving you have that inherent talent. And a huge part of this is being really concerned about being judged and super sensitive to being wrong or making mistakes. Because if you think intelligence is fixed, well, then a mistake feels like proof you're just not smart.
Yeah. Does that sound familiar to anyone listening? Maybe you see it in yourself sometimes or, people you know. I could definitely picture that.
Yeah.
People who always seem like they have to prove themselves, like they're keeping score.
Yeah, and very resistant maybe to feedback or correction.
Totally. Okay, so that's the fixed side. What about the other one, the growth mindset? How's that different?
So the growth mindset, it's built on the complete opposite idea, really. It's the belief that they can be developed through dedication, through hard work, finding the right strategies, persevering. You can actually get smarter, more skilled, more capable.
So it's not about proving, it's about...
Improving. Exactly. The focus shifts entirely. People with a growth mindset, they're naturally drawn to learning. Challenges aren't threats, they're opportunities to stretch and grow. They see effort not as a sign you lack talent, but as the path to getting good at something. And they tend to be way more open to feedback, even critical feedback, because it's just information to help them learn.
Right, it's data.
Yeah, it's data. And ultimately, they believe true potential isn't some fixed thing. It's, unknown. It can keep growing.
Okay, so two really different ways of looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
How does this actually play out then? Like when we have to learn something new or face a big challenge?
This is where it gets really interesting. The fixed mindset. It can seriously get in the way of learning.
How so?
Well, if you think your intelligence is limited, you're naturally going to, shy away from things that might express that limit.
Right. Makes sense. Avoid looking dumb.
Exactly. And you might even feel threatened when other people succeed, like their success somehow diminishes you.
Ooh, yeah.
There's often this tendency to hide deficiencies, avoid situations where you might not look competent, and you might even distort feedback, play up the successes, brush off the failures, blame something else.
So you never really get an accurate picture of where you are.
Precisely. Howard Gardner talks about this. So you end up not really knowing your own strengths and weaknesses because the goal is always just appearing capable, not actually being capable or understanding yourself.
Wow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. If looking smart is the main goal, anything that risks that image is, something to avoid. So what about the growth mindset person in those same spots?
Totally different dynamic. They actively seek out challenges. They see them as the best way to learn.
Instead of threats, they're opportunities.
And other people's success. It's often inspiring, not threatening, like, wow, look what they did. Maybe I can learn something from that. Effort, for them, isn't embarrassing. It's the engine of mastery. And setbacks. They're not verdicts on your worth. They're just bumps in the road. Valuable feedback to help you adjust and keep going.
You know, the source material had that really great experiment with kids and puzzles. That seemed to show this perfectly.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. So they gave kids with both mindsets some puzzles, moderately hard, everyone enjoyed them.
Right.
But then they offered much harder puzzles. And the kids with the fixed mindset, their enjoyment just plummeted.
Really?
Yeah, and they were less keen to take puzzles home to practice. Some even made excuses, like to avoid the harder ones.
Even the kids who did well on the first set.
Yeah.
The ones who seemed good at puzzles.
That's the kicker, yes.
Yeah.
Even those kids, having that supposed puzzle talent didn't buffer them. The challenge felt like a threat to that identity. Like, uh-oh, maybe I'm not so smart after all if I struggle.
Wow. That is telling. Afraid that struggling would erase the talent label. Yeah. Okay, so the growth mindset kids.
Oh, they were completely different. They were fascinated by the hard puzzles. They didn't want to stop.
They saw it as a chance to learn.
Exactly. It just perfectly shows that difference. Fixed mindset is about proving what you are. Growth mindset is about developing what you can become.
And this isn't just kids and puzzles,
Yeah.
right? There's something about pre-med students, too.
Yes. Another great example. Researchers watched pre-med students, tough courses, right? The fixed mindset students were often laser focused on the grade. They do almost anything for that A, except maybe really dive deep into the learning itself.
So the grade was the goal, not necessarily the understanding.
Pretty much the external validation, whereas the growth mindset students, they were much more proactive, asking questions, finding extra resources, really getting into the material because they wanted to understand. The good grades were more like a byproduct of that deep engagement.
So the fixed mindset is more about looking smart than being smart, in a way. Hinders real learning.
That's a good way to put it. It prioritizes appearing competent over becoming competent.
Okay, so that passivity in learning makes sense. Now, what about effort? How do the mindsets view plain old hard work?
Well, for the fixed mindset person, needing to put in a lot of effort can actually feel kind of shameful.
Really? Why?
Because the underlying belief is, if you were really talented, it would just come easily. You wouldn't need to work so hard.
Huh. So effort is like evidence you don't have the magic touch.
Pretty much, so they might avoid effort or even hide how hard they're working because they don't want to seem like they lack that natural gift.
That's so counterintuitive, isn't it? You'd think hard work is always good. But okay, growth mindset must see it differently.
Oh, completely differently. For the growth mindset, effort is everything. It's the secret sauce. It's what turns potential, whatever you start with, into actual accomplishment.
Right.
They get that even geniuses work incredibly hard. The source mentions Babe Ruth, apparently not a natural hitter at first.
No way.
Yeah. But achieved greatness through just relentless commitment, practice, off-season training, the works. And there's a great quote from Chuck Yeager, the test pilot, basically saying, there's no such thing as a natural pilot. It's all hard work.
So it's about the process, becoming, not just being.
Exactly. The growth mindset lets you be a work in progress. It's okay not to be perfect now. The fixed mindset demands perfection from the get-go.
Which sounds incredibly stressful. Okay, so effort is key for growth. What about failure? It happens to everyone. How do the mindsets handle it?
Failure. This is a huge one. For someone deep in a fixed mindset, failure can feel catastrophic.
How so?
It's not just, okay, that didn't work out. It often becomes personal. It shifts from I failed to I am a failure.
Oof, that's a heavy identity to take on.
Totally. And that leads to defensiveness, right?
Yeah.
Blaming other people, blaming circumstances, a real reluctance to try again because that feeling of failure is just too painful. The source talks about junior high kids getting bad grades and then just tearing themselves down saying they're stupid or lashing out and blaming the teacher unfairly. Anything to avoid facing the idea they might just lack innate ability.
Yeah. There's the story of Loretta, who got labeled by a kindergarten test. And the author herself talks about avoiding spelling bees, French contests, just terrified of losing and shattering that smart kid image.
Even successful people struggle with this. Ernie Els, the golfer, worrying about how losing looks.
Exactly. As that New York Times piece said, failure becomes an identity, not an action. And that just shuts down learning and risk-taking.
It sounds incredibly limiting. So the growth mindset response to failure must be, well, different.
Night and day. The growth mindset sees failure as information, as an opportunity, actually.
An opportunity, how?
An opportunity to learn. It's feedback. It says, okay, this approach didn't work. What can I try differently? Where do I need to put in more effort?
Gotcha.
There's some amazing examples. Miranda, the wrestler, someone told her, you're a joke after a loss.
Ouch.
Yeah. But instead of quitting, it just fueled her. She worked harder, proved them wrong, won an Olympic medal, and then, incredibly, was excited to start over at the bottom in law school.
And Christopher Reeve, after his accident, paralyzed, doctors gave a grim outlook. But he just refused to accept it as a fixed state. He pushed himself with exercise, trying to regain function beyond what anyone thought possible.
That's incredible resilience.
It really is. Miranda even apparently said near the end of her life that she loved exploring herself and was excited by the challenge of starting something new. It's that core belief. Failure isn't the end, it's part of the process. It's a lesson.
Those stories really hit home. It's about framing adversity completely differently. Okay, now, something else that really stood out was about praise. How we praise people seems to matter.
Oh, absolutely. This is huge, especially for parents, teachers, managers, anyone giving feedback.
Right.
Research shows pretty clearly that praising someone's inherent abilities, saying you're so smart or you're so talented, can actually backfire.
Backfire. How?
It pushes them towards a fixed mindset. They hear that and they think, okay, I'm smart, now I have to keep looking smart.
Ah, so they might avoid challenges.
Exactly. They don't want to do anything that might expose a flaw and make them look not smart, contradicting the label. The focus shifts from learning to just preserving that image.
This makes you really think about how you talk to kids, or even colleagues. So if praising ability isn't the way, what should we be praising?
Effort, strategy, process, persistence. Focus on what they did, not what they are.
Okay.
Acknowledge the hard work they put in, the clever strategy they tried, how they stuck with it when it got tough. That reinforces the idea that success comes from doing, from effort and learning.
There's research on this too.
Loads of it. Studies show kids praised for effort. They love tackling hard problems. Their performance actually improves after they hit a difficulty.
Wow.
There's even that analogy with IQ tests. Praising ability after a tough part seemed to make scores go down on the next part. Praising effort, scores went up.
That's incredible. Like
Yeah.
the praise itself changed their capability in that moment.
It changed their approach, their willingness to engage and risk failure. There's also that real-life story from the mother whose really bright son started avoiding hard work because he was always told he was smart.
Right. He didn't want to risk looking not smart.
Exactly. That smart label became this fragile thing he had to protect instead of a foundation to build on.
Man, the implications for how we encourage people are just huge.
Mhm.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. How do these mindsets show up in our relationships? With partners, friends?
Oh, they play a massive role there too. Someone with a fixed mindset often assumes their partner's traits are just fixed. That's just how they are.
No room for change.
Right. Which can lead pretty quickly to blame when problems pop up. Or even contempt, because if you think the flaw is permanent, what's the point in trying to work on it?
Yeah, you just get frustrated.
Exactly.
Yep.
The source uses Brenda and Jack as an example. Their communication just broke down because they kept blaming fixed personality traits instead of seeing issues as things they could tackle together. And then there's Penelope, always searching for the perfect partner, then getting totally derailed by minor flaws because she saw them as unchangeable deal breakers.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. As that relationship expert Daniel Weil says, choosing a partner is basically choosing a set of problems. The fixed mindset often ignores that, chasing an illusion of perfection.
So the fixed mindset leads to judging and finding fault, less working together. How does the growth mindset approach relationships then?
It sees relationships as dynamic, as opportunities for growth, both for the individuals and for the relationship itself.
Okay.
There's this underlying belief that, yeah, you can work through disagreements, you can learn to communicate better, partners can support each other's growth.
Like a team effort.
Totally. Lori and James are the example here. Laura had some issues, kind of self-centered, defensive, but James believed she could grow, supported her, and she did learn to communicate better. And they championed each other's goals.
So it's about seeing potential and working together.
Yes. Challenges become chances to strengthen the bond, not reasons to bail. It builds a much more resilient, fulfilling partnership.
What about competition in relationships? Does mindset affect that?
Oh, definitely. In a fixed mindset, that need to prove yourself, it can easily spill over into competing with your partner.
Like who's smarter? Who's more successful?
Exactly. Think Susan and Martin at the conference. Martin felt threatened because Susan was getting attention for her work.
Yikes.
Or Cynthia, who apparently needed to be as good as or better than her partners at everything they did, leaves no room for the partner to just be themselves, right?
Yeah, that sounds suffocating.
Whereas the growth mindset fosters more collaboration, you can celebrate your partner's wins without feeling like it diminishes you. Shared joy.
It definitely sounds like the growth mindset makes for healthier relationships. Okay, let's zoom out again. Leadership, business. How do mindsets play out there?
Well, in leadership, a fixed mindset can lead to something called CEO disease.
CEO disease. What's that?
It's when leaders, maybe after some early success, get stuck. They rely on what worked before, they resist change, they want to maintain this image of always being right, always successful.
Afraid to look fallible.
Exactly. Lee Iacocca at Chrysler later on is sometimes cited as an example, kept making similar cars even when the market had moved on.
Right.
These leaders might chase short-term wins to boost their own image rather than focusing on the company's long-term health. Sometimes it's that genius with 1,000 helpers model. They think they're the only brilliant one, and everyone else just executes their vision.
Which sounds like a recipe for stagnation, maybe even disaster.
Yeah.
So what does effective growth-minded leadership look like?
Growth mindset leaders, they're usually driven by constant self-improvement. They're willing to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and about the business.
Okay.
Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark famously said, "I never stop trying to be qualified for the job." That humility, that drive to keep learning. They prioritize the company's long-term growth over quick personal wins, even if it means facing tough decisions or criticism. Albert Dunlap is mentioned as a contrast, very fixed mindset, focused on ruthless short-term gains.
Right.
And Jim Collins's good to great research really highlights this. The companies that made that leap, led by humble, growth-minded leaders who confronted the brutal facts but kept faith in the future.
Not the flashy genius types necessarily.
Often not. Lou Gerstner at IBM is another example, came in, focused on fundamental change and adapting, not just clinging to IBM's past glory. Growth mindset in action. There was even that cool study by Wood and Bandura simulating managers, the growth mindset ones, built more adaptable, innovative, effective teams, like creating an anti-Enron culture versus an Enron-type culture.
So in business, growth mindset means humility, learning, adapting, focusing long-term.
Yes.
Okay, one more big area. Sports, the land of the natural.
Ah, yes, sports. Where the myth of the naturals may be strongest. We love those stories, right?
Yeah.
Effortless talent from day one. But the source really pushes back on that. Take Billy Beane from Moneyball. Huge natural talent, everyone said. But he struggled, partly because he didn't handle failure well, didn't have that growth mindset to work through the difficulties.
Interesting. So talent wasn't enough.
Exactly. Contrast him with Lenny Dykstra. Maybe less natural ability, but ferocious work ethic, competitive drive, total growth mindset, huge success.
Right.
And Michael Jordan. Even MJ always hammered on about practice, improvement over just innate talent.
So even at the highest levels, mindset is crucial. What about character in sports? Is that linked?
Absolutely. The athletes with real character, resilience, sportsmanship, often the ones with a growth mindset.
Like who?
Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, talked about how dyslexia made them have to work way harder, which helped them win the Olympic decathlon.
Wow. Turning a challenge into a strength.
Exactly. Or the 2004 Boston Red Sox. Bunch of no-names, apparently. Traded away stars, but they had incredible teamwork, work ethic, belief, and won the World Series. Collective growth mindset.
That's a great story.
And think of champions like Pete Sampras, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, who overcame asthma attacks during races, Mia Hamm, all constantly talking about hard work, getting better, not just relying on talent. And on the flip side, you see athletes with maybe more fixed mindsets. Like John McEnroe sometimes seemed relying on sheer talent, disliking practice, maybe not reaching their absolute peak consistently.
Right. And coaching matters too, presumably.
Hugely. John Wooden at UCLA, all about learning, improvement, team over stars. Contrast that with maybe Bob Knight, who seemed more fixed in his ways, relying on intimidation.
Hmm.
Even Tiger Woods' dad, Earl, instilled mental toughness, course management, that resilient mindset from a super young age. It's about cultivating that growth approach. Character isn't just born, it's often built through that mindset.
Fascinating. It really seems universal, this mindset stuff. Now, you mentioned the source talks about a false growth mindset. What's that about?
Yeah, that's an important point. It's basically when someone kind of pays lip service to the idea, they might say, oh yeah, I have a growth mindset, or use the buzzwords.
Hmm.
But deep down, they don't really buy into it, or they don't actually practice it. They might say they value learning from mistakes, but then get defensive or blame others when they actually mess up.
Ah, so it's like a surface level thing, not genuine.
Exactly. It's the difference between knowing the words and truly living the principles. Authenticity and consistent behavior are the keys.
Gotcha. Just saying it doesn't make it so. Okay, so for people listening, maybe they recognize some fixed mindset tendencies in themselves. What can they actually do? What are some practical steps to nudge towards growth?
Well, the source offers some good strategies. A big first step is just awareness. Start noticing your own fixed mindset triggers.
Like, what situations set off that feeling of needing to prove yourself?
Exactly. Or that fear of failure. What sparks that voice? And speaking of the voice, another technique is to actually give that fixed mindset voice a name, like dumping Dan in the book.
Uh-huh. Okay. Why does that help?
It creates a little distance, helps you recognize, oh, that's not me, that's just my fixed mindset persona talking. Makes it easier to challenge it. But the real work is actively practicing growth-oriented thinking and behavior, intentionally choosing challenges you might normally avoid.
Leaning into discomfort a bit.
Yeah, and consciously reframing setbacks. Not, I'm stupid, but, okay, what can I learn from this? What's the different strategy? Focusing praise, even self-praise, on effort and process, not just outcome.
Right.
Learning about brain plasticity helps too. The Brainology program showed that when students understand their brain can grow stronger with effort, like a muscle, it really motivates them.
Believing change is possible neurologically.
Exactly. And making concrete plans, growth-oriented plans,
Yeah.
and sticking to them even when it feels hard. Like those depressed students who still took action because they had a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm. It's about consistent action.
Yes. Even structuring family chats around learning, mistakes, effort that can build a growth culture at home. It takes conscious practice.
These sound like really concrete things people can try.
Hmm.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the single biggest takeaway you want people to walk away with?
I think the most powerful message really is that your abilities, your intelligence, they aren't fixed. They're not predetermined. They can absolutely be developed through dedication, hard work, learning from experience. Embracing that growth mindset, truly embracing it, can unlock potential you didn't even know you had in every part of your life.
So it shifts from proving yourself.
Do improving yourself, exactly. And that shift, that focus on the journey of getting better, that can be incredibly freeing and ultimately way more fulfilling.
That's a really hopeful note to end on. Okay, so for you listening, one last thought to maybe ponder this week. Think about one area, just one, where you might hold a bit of a fixed view about yourself, your abilities, your potential there. What's one tiny shift in thinking you could try? Maybe just leaning a bit more into the idea that effort could make a difference there. What could you experiment with? And what might open up if you really did embrace that growth perspective, even just in that one little area?
It's a journey, right?
Absolutely. It's an ongoing journey, learning and growing. We really hope this deep dive gave you some useful ideas and maybe some tools to take along with you on yours.